Good morning, this is Barry Odell with the Church of Christ at Mammoth Spring Facebook page. Glad to see everybody joining on. Hey, Danny and Lyle and Joni, good to see you three on here at the moment. And I know others are joining on too. Well, hope everybody's having a good day so far. Hello, Jennifer and Gail and the kids. All right. I'm pulling it up on my phone because I can't see anything on my computer. Looks like everything's working okay. All right, guys. We are in Romans chapter 1. Hey, Sheila, good to see you this morning. As always, say it every day, pretty much. If you have any questions or comments while we're going along, please use the comment section, and I will address them as I see them. Like and share our content on Facebook. Get the message out. If you have folks who don't do Facebook who might like to do studies like this, chapter by chapter, then send them over to our YouTube channel, Mammoth Spring Church of Christ. All of our content is available there. Have a Bible question says good morning. Now, I'm not sure which part of have a Bible. Let me tell you, for those of you who listen to me, maybe every day, maybe not every day, but the have a Bible question is an excellent, I guess it's a page, but it's associated with the Northwest Florida School of Biblical Studies in Pensacola, Florida. And they go live every Tuesday night. And whoever it is commenting, whether it's you, Guyton, or someone else, why don't you put some information in our comment section here about your program, Have a Bible Question. It's Guyton Montgomery, Troy Spradlin, Jeff Orr, and then some special guests. Okay, it is Guyton. Hey, man, good to have you on here today. Brian, good to see you. So anyway, on Tuesday nights, I think it's around 7 p.m. Central. Correct me if I'm wrong, Guyton, but it would be good for you to like and follow the Have a Bible Question Facebook page. They put out a lot of good content. All right, guys, we are ready for Romans. Hey, we just got a link. There it is, haveabiblequestion.com. Thank you, Guyton, for sharing that. It's good to be able to promote other good content on the internet because there's so much out there, and that's just another way to do it. Okay, there it is, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Central Time. And again, that's out of Pensacola, Florida. Good stuff. Hey, Barry and Glenda Howell, hope you guys are doing well over in Dover, Tennessee. All right, so let's get to it. Romans chapter 1, we introduced the book yesterday, and I didn't spend a lot of time on the introduction. I told you that, a lot of, and this is just my personal opinion, I think we can kind of cloud the meaning of a book when we try to hone in on one verse and say this is the theme of the book or the purpose of the book overall. We have to remember that when Paul wrote what we call the book of Romans, all right, these 16 chapters and 433 verses, this was just a letter. One document that he sent to the Roman church that addressed all kinds of issues. So that's how we're going to approach it, all right? I'm not going to necessarily try to break it down to one particular theme or one particular topic because he covers so many different things. We don't know when the church was established, but what we do know is that it had, by the time Paul wrote this letter, it had been in existence for such a period of time as their faith, as he says in Romans chapter 1 and verse 8, had spread throughout the whole world. They had earned or gained a reputation in the process of time. It could have been established, as I put here, use my cursor, from the persecution as recorded in Acts chapter 8, when all the Christians who were in Jerusalem were scattered except for the apostles. And we know that on the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2, when the church was established, that there were many people from Rome who came to Jerusalem. Well, they had to go back at some point in time. So we just don't know when exactly the church in Rome started. But it was a good congregation. Had some issues, as every congregation does, as every good congregation does. There's no such thing as a perfect congregation of God's people. But that's kind of another subject. So we covered the first 17 verses yesterday, and we're going to start in verse 18 today and try to get through the end of the chapter. And hey, Miss Louise, good to see you on here this morning. So here's how we're going to do it. Romans 1:18 to 32. One thing that comes out in this particular section of Romans is that people are capable of all forms of evil when they choose not to retain God in their knowledge. That's one thing that Paul addresses here. And here's how it starts. When you look where we stopped yesterday at Romans 1 and verse 17, he's, of course, verse 16, he says, I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For therein is the righteousness of God revealed. Okay, so the righteousness of God has been revealed, Romans 1 verse 17, because the wrath of God has been revealed. Verse 18. Everybody needs to hear the gospel, and Paul's going to touch on that, particularly in Romans chapter 3. He concludes in Romans chapter 3 and verse 9 that all are under sin. Well, if all are under sin, all need the gospel. So the righteousness of God has been revealed, Romans 1:17, because the wrath of God has been revealed, verse 18, from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who, and I like the way the King James puts this here, or rather the New King James, who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Number one, let's deal with verse 18 here. Ungodliness, that is impiety, irreverence. God's wrath comes out against irreverent people, irreverent behavior, impiety, things like that. And when you look there at verse 18, when it talks about his wrath, this is a legal, this is not an emotional wrath. Remember, we were studying through Daniel just last week, and Nebuchadnezzar, and even Darius, if I remember right, Daniel chapter 6, they flew into a rage when things didn't go their way. They had an extremely emotional reaction to things that they didn't like. That's not how God reacts. He's not controlled by the emotions that you and I might be controlled by. This wrath of God in verse 18 is his legal anger. His law has been violated, and so his wrath will come forth. And here's what we have to understand: while he can be full of wrath or anger, that has to be understood in light also with his long suffering. All right? But his wrath has been revealed against those who are impious or irreverent and unrighteous, and they suppress the truth in unrighteousness. The truth can be held down. It can be suppressed by the way a person lives. God's not going to tolerate that very long. Okay, so verses 19 through 22 here, as you see on the screen, God can be known. What may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. The evidence that there is a God, that there can be a wrath of God or a righteousness from God, that God will do what's right and that we can be righteous in his eyes, in both directions. We can be right with God. Has been made known. He's shown it. Well, how has God revealed himself to mankind, even to ungodly and unrighteous mankind? Well, for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. So God can be, it can be known that there is a God, that there is as it says here, a powerful, eternally powerful God by the things that are created. And the way it states it there at the end of the verse 20, people are without excuse if they do not believe in God, or if they conduct themselves, again, ungodly and unrighteously, verse 18, they're without excuse, because the reality of a God is evident in the creation. He can be known. Now, you cannot know, you can't, while nature does reveal things about God, you can't know, there are a lot of things you cannot know about God just by looking at nature. I don't really want to get into that right now, but the fact that he is powerful, and his Godhead, as it says there in verse 20, that word means the state of being God. What makes God God can be seen when you look at creation. But here's the problem, verse 21. Although they knew God, okay, it's possible to see a creator, a designer in creation. They knew that. But they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools. Well, how did they do that? That's verse 22, or verse 23. They changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. So I'm going off of this premise here for the rest of Romans chapter 1. People are capable of, I would say, not only all forms of evil, but unimaginable to most of us forms of evil when they choose not to retain God in their knowledge. One way is through idolatry. Idolatry results from rejecting God. And that's what we just read in verse 23. They change God into what they picture God looks like. You think about the gods of the Egyptians, for instance. When God sent those plagues against the Egyptians, he said, I am bringing judgment against all the gods of Egypt. They worship flies. They worship frogs. They worship the sun. They worship the Nile River. When you choose not to retain God in your knowledge, as this text continues to flow here, you're going to worship, just look at it here. Verse 24, therefore God also gave them up, or handed them over to uncleanness and the lust of their hearts, to dishonor their bodies among themselves, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. So idolatry. If we choose to turn away from God, if we choose, again, referring back up to verse 18, to live ungodly and unrighteous lives, the next natural step, you might say, would be to turn to idolatry. We'll worship ourselves. We'll put ourselves ahead of everything. We'll worship the things around us, the creature rather than the one who created the creatures. Verse 25. A next thing I see here is that sexual perversion results from rejecting God. For this reason, because now they're serving what has been created rather than the one who has created the created things. What will they do? Well, he'll give them up to vile passions. For even their women exchange the natural use for what is against nature. Likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust for one another. Men with men, committing things which are shameful. There is no question, it's beyond question what Paul is talking about here. There's this line of thinking that people hold to, that frankly, homosexuality is not a sin. Sexual perversion is not a sin. It's a lifestyle. Well, it's a lifestyle. There's no question about that. And it's a choice that a person makes. But notice the language here at the end of verse 26. Changing what is natural for what is against nature. The practices that so many people are involved in, and that were involved in even in Paul's day, is not natural. It is unnatural. Well, when you don't retain the one who created nature in your mind, you will do what is unnatural. That's what ultimately it'll lead to. So women with women, men with men, committing what is shameful and receiving in themselves the penalty of their error which was due. In other words, there are consequences for living like that. For going against the design and the laws of nature, there will be consequences. And we see it. We see it in our society, and it's nothing new. There's no question about that. But there are consequences, no question about it. Individually, familial consequences, societal consequences. There's a domino effect, you might say. If I'm not willing to retain God in my knowledge, I'll turn to idolatry. I'll worship myself. I'll worship what's been created rather than the one who created it. I'll turn to sexual perversion. And the fact of the matter is this: if we keep on going that way, which is the imagery set up here in Romans chapter 1, God will let a person go to the deepest and darkest ends thinkable. Like I said, the word I used earlier was unimaginable. People will do things that what we would consider a normal person would never even think of doing. All right? So he's going to go into detail here. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting. God has not and will not ever force anyone to do what's right. He will not well, that's not the right word. He won't force anybody to do what they should do. He will let you go your own way. And Paul says that 3 times. Verse 24, verse 26, and verse 28. Gave them up, gave them up, gave them over. He'll let you go. Notice some of the things listed here. Being filled with all unrighteousness. Again, anything you could imagine, and probably some things you can't imagine. People will do. Fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness. They are whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil. Listen to this one, inventors of evil things. If there's something bad out there that somebody hasn't thought of, there may be somebody who will think of it. Again, the depths that people will go, the depths that people will reach when they turn their back on God, on a creator, on any sense of moral, a moral hierarchy, if you will, a higher power. They'll invent evil things. Disobedient to parents. Now that seems like a very common, parents often can complain. But this isn't just, a child not, you say, hey, go clean your room, and you have to tell them 2 or 3 times. This is a child who lives to be disobedient, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful. So again, God will let you go to the deepest and darkest ends thinkable, imaginable. And probably, again, for some folks, there are people in society, historically, currently, who have done and who will done things that we'd think, man, where did he come up with that? I don't know. Just for me personally, you think of, or I think of, things like Auschwitz, the Nazi death camps, things that were done to millions upon millions of human beings in the name of, Adolf Hitler was a racist, in the name of racism. Hauling people in trains to stations, emptying all the train cars and sending them immediately into basically an airtight shelter and gassing them all to death. That's unimaginable. But people did it. And probably we could probably think of other examples too. Torture. I guess perhaps in our lifetime we think of things like September 11th, 2001, getting on an airplane and flying it into an occupied building in the name of religion. Those are people who have turned their back on God. They chose not to retain God in their knowledge. And I suppose we could come up with more examples, but God will let us go in that direction if we choose not to retain Him in our knowledge. Now look at verse 32 here, and we'll wrap it up. Who, knowing the righteous judgment of God, and that's the key. It's these people, it's not that they don't know that there is a God. It's not that these are completely ignorant and backward, not necessarily atheists, just they have no clue that there is a higher power, These people know this. They know the righteous judgment of God, that God's going to judge rightly and accurately. That those who practice such things are deserving of death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. So it's not just about, rebelling against God, going your own way, and going to places that, again, most normal people might not even think of going to. It's not just about doing those things, but you notice the last part of verse 32, but approve of those who practice them. They kind of overlook it, ignore it, perhaps in some ways condone it. And the fact of the matter is, if you are aware of something that's going on that is evil and you ignore it, you are condoning it. There's no question about that. This last half of this chapter, again, is framed in the fact that God's righteousness has been revealed because his wrath has been revealed. Because his wrath has been revealed from heaven, verse 18, we need to know how to be righteous with him. And that's what the gospel does. Romans 1 and verse 16. Obedience to the gospel makes one righteous. That's where the righteousness of God is found. So we need to know it. And he's going to kind of, Paul, as you open chapter 2, he's going to go further into this and talk specifically to a Jewish audience. Remember, I told you yesterday, as you look at Romans 1 and verse 13, it appears that the Roman church was a majority Gentile background people, because he was talking about having fruit among other Gentiles. Well, the implication there is that there were a lot of Gentiles in Rome, but there's also a Jewish audience in Rome in the church, and that's what chapter 2 is going to address. The Jewish people, of course, thought they were God's and that God was theirs. So as Paul is writing this letter, you could think of him writing this about chapter 1, about issues that the Gentiles, the sins of the Gentiles, and the Jews are glad, and they're probably thinking, man, they really need to hear that. And how you think about this. How many people have sat in an auditorium on a Sunday and listened to a sermon and thought, boy, I wish so-and-so was here because they really need to hear this. And they have it's like they have no concept of reflection, of looking inside, and maybe I need to hear this. Well, Paul's going to handle that in Romans chapter 2 with the Gentiles, or rather with the Jews. All right, guys, that is Romans chapter 1. I don't see any questions or comments in this comment section. Glad you were all here today. Of course, tomorrow's Friday, so I won't do a video tomorrow, but I appreciate you being on here today. As always, if you have any questions or comments, even after the stream is over, you can access the comment section. You can send me a private message, however you want to do it. I guess that's it, guys. Hope you have a good day and a good weekend. And we'll plan on being back here Monday morning at 11 o'clock, and we will start Romans chapter 2. Have a good day.